Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. With me this week is Amac, the GM of a custom Gundam TTRPG actual play podcast called Feddie Scum. The show has been running for 4 years now. Congrats on that, Adam, and the rest of the gang. When not working on the show, Amac is writing the Gundam system that the podcast uses, testing other people's systems on the show, RPG Stress Test, and doing other fun things with his friends at Dead Set Media. All right, welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me, yeah.
So, to start off, I'd love to know what your tabletop role-playing game backstory is. So, how you found them, how you got into them, how you started playing. Introduce yourself, too. Sorry.
I'm Adam. I also go by Amac online in most places, like on Twitter and stuff like that. But as far as my beginning and introduction to TTRPGs, it's fairly standard. Early high school, group of friends. I started as a player. One of my other friends in Dead Set Media, Zach, he actually was our primary GM back then, and it was D&D 3.5, if I recall correctly. Since then, gravitated to more Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, Call of Cthulhu. I like me some D100 systems. Kind of, fell into this little thing that I'm doing with Feddie Scum.
Yeah. I don't know if "fell" is the right word, but we'll explore that later. Figure out the exact origins. But yeah, that's quite the journey, and it sounds like you played a lot of fun games so far. So, how did you get into running games then for people? I'm sure you probably had run some games before Feddie Scum, before you decided I'm going to build a system from the ground up and also make a show out of it. So, yeah, what was your first experience running games? You kind of remember what the system was, what the group was, how that went?
It was Rogue Trader, Dark Heresy, the Fantasy Flight versions of them. Basically, it was out of necessity. None of my other friends knew enough about 40K to run those systems, and 40K is it's a big ask to you be like, hey, Zach, Dallas, run this game system in a setting you know nothing about. Learn a lot about the setting and then run it.
Right.
So instead, it was like, oh well, I guess naturally I have to be the one to run the game. And so that was my first foray into it, is running Dark Heresy specifically for my other co-stars on Stress Test and Feddie Scum.
Did you play any Warhammer then growing up? Any 40K, or did you read any of the books or anything like that?
So I had an uncle who would give me hand-me-down stuff.
Cool.
And he was in and out of being interested in certain things. So I had a whole SNES with the best games curated and handed to me. Very spoiled in that regard, but it was the PS1 era behind a gen. But similarly, he gave me a lot of 40K stuff hand me down, and that kind of sparked my interest in it. And I got really into the hobby side of it, less so the war game side of it. And kind of fell into love with painting minis. And this eventually kind of also bridged into Gunpla, the hobby side of Gundam, which okay, goes hand in hand there with the other half of the story. But that was my intro to 40K and the lore that is kind of included in the rule books, the fluff there, and that led me to Dark Heresy and Rogue Trader.
Nice, makes sense. Connecting the dots here. So, in all of your experience running games, from Rogue Trader to your current system, what are you calling your current system, by the way, so I can just refer to it by the name? Are you just calling it, Yeah.
Tentatively right now it's called Operation V, and that's because of it's a Universal Century Gundam reference. It's what the project that built the first Gundam was called.
Okay, smart. That's a good call. Okay, Operation V. I will just call it that from now on, so long as I remember. So, yeah, running Operation V, running Rogue Trader, that kind of thing. What are some of the big mistakes you feel like you've made, or lessons you had to learn the hard way, when you first started running games, or even, more recently, what that you feel like folks at home could learn a little bit from?
I think a big mistake that a lot of people make, and this was one that I had issue with, was controlling campaign scope and player scope. And so you can't just tell your friends, hey, we're doing a Call of Cthulhu game. Roll up a character and show up. You got to be a little bit more specific about the scope. So, hey, I'm running a Call of Cthulhu game. It's going to be set in Maine at a university. You're all going to be students or faculty. There's been disappearances around the campus. You need to have a reason why you're looking into this. Something that binds the party. And I use Call of Cthulhu as an example because it's a common one that people have issues with. Of after you solve your first big mystery, the group kind of has no reason to stay together unless they
Mhm.
really hit it off. And so it's just good to keep that in mind, that scope of your what you want your campaign to be and what players will fit into that as you pitch it to them, so that they make characters that kind of immediately have buy-in to what you're going to be running.
Yeah, buy-in is good. Especially when it's a brand new game, it's good to all be on the same page so that
Hmm.
they engage immediately with the plot and they're not, aimlessly wandering or not gelling with the rest of the group, that kind of thing. Those are definitely symptoms that you can see when
Yeah,
you've not done it well enough.
tone can be massively off as well if you're not
Mm.
clear on the tone.
Yes.
For example, Cthulhu, before Pulp Cthulhu existed, Cthulhu had a bit of a small issue of some players wanting to kind of play Indiana Jones punching people, and other people wanting to play like detectives who weren't so punchy.
Mhm.
And this sometimes led to kind of complications in the direction things were meant to go. But they kind of solved that.
Very much a different game than a lot of other tabletops that are hack and slash. If you haven't played Call of Cthulhu out there, then I suggest that the starters set is pretty cheap, and D100s are really fun. It's a fun system.
I would also say, like, don't overplan. A lot of first time DMs overplan. I was overplanning a lot my
Hmm.
first game that I wanted to run. And even for something like Call of Cthulhu, you don't have to overplan that much. A lot of the planning that people go to is like treating it like it's a sandbox game. And
Yeah.
that's okay if it's a sandbox game, but most people don't play like that. Most people kind of adhere to a narrative structure, and you can really cut down on the amount of time you spend planning and writing outlines and stuff by following along with those assumptions.
As far as really fun memories, good memories, that have happened in your games that come to mind, without obviously giving us too big of spoilers on Feddie Scum, if you can. Yeah, what are some of your favorite moments at the table that have happened, and maybe some of the lessons that you could give to people from those good things?
There's this arc in Feddie Scum called, referred to as the Miami arc, where they are in after going kind of AWOL after a certain character's death, player character. Don't want to get into specifics.
Yeah, yeah.
They wind up in the kind of destroyed, what's left of Miami, and the group is kind of a little down in the dumps, obviously. There's a rising tension because there is a spy in the group. It's meta knowledge; the players know who the spy is, but the characters don't. And so there's kind of a dramatic irony, like causing tension throughout every scene, and it just kind of increases as this arc kind of went on, along with several NPCs kind of trying to get at the spy or align themselves with the spy, as the spy makes an attempt to defect to safety, basically.
Hmm.
So the tension was slowly racketing up, and it turned out really well. And I think the key ingredients, because I've been thinking, I went back to this arc a lot, and I think the key ingredients was uh, there's very little combat, but the stakes were there, and the stakes were reiterated upon again and again. Kind of a Chekhov's gun situation. It was everyone knew that when this happened, when this line was crossed, it would be chaos. People would start fighting each other,
Yeah.
player versus player. Playing with that tension, dragging it on, and slowly increasing it. The whole boiling a crab or lobster analogy.
Mm.
You slowly burn it, like bringing up the heat so they don't notice. I think applies. And yeah, I think that would be a personal takeaway is how to handle tension, keeping it slower and building to it. Um, just really got to emphasize the stakes.
Yeah, I like that. And it's very hard to build tension slowly across the multiple sessions and episodes and stuff. So,
Hmm.
hats off to you and to the players for not using that metagame information. I feel like it's an easy trap to fall into for them to immediately try to address it somehow, like, well, my character is gonna notice this or that, or ask you this pointed question that's gonna dig up whatever thing you're hiding. So yeah, it's definitely hard to pull off, but I feel like when you do, like you said, it can feel really good.
Thankfully, they were all really good sports,
Yeah,
and they inched toward the conclusion
right.
themselves. They themselves did not want to overstep that line, but they knew that there was fun in approaching it as close as they could to put to make a scene very palpable.
That's fun. That's fun stuff. All right. You talked about over planning earlier. So this is kind of in that same vein. Has there ever been a time where a player has just totally destroyed your best laid plans with one decision or one roll of the die, and you've had to think on your feet quickly and remedy it?
One thing in Feddie Scum that tripped me up, kind of pretty massively, was the players. I don't know how to say this in a good way. They basically kidnapped an NPC that I was not intending on making a permanent member of the cast.
Okay.
Um, it was more of taking him as a prisoner of war for information. He was kind of reluctant in terms of being an enemy combatant, not the most loyal in the first place, but they were kind of coercing him into joining their side, and that was not a thing I had really considered. And this character turned out to be a fan favorite and a player favorite, and ended up massively paying off, like developing this character additionally than what I had planned for them, which was like two throwaway lines of development pretty much, and just being
Right.
kind of a reoccurring joke of like a mostly incompetent pilot who's a little bit of a pushover.
Hmm.
It turned out to be one of the emotional hard points of the series.
Funny how it happens. Funny
Yeah.
how it happens. Yeah. All right. This question is I mean, I don't know how applicable it is because your whole system is being built from the ground up. Obviously,
Mhm.
I know you've got more than a framework at this point, but are there any house rules, made up rules, homebrew rules you like to include in your games that you feel like make things more fun or add to the narrative richness, or anything like that you want to pass
Mm.
on to people?
With specifically with Operation V and Feddie Scum, I
Yeah.
can get into it a little bit later because there's a bit of a
Okay.
dilemma I ran into in developing it and doing the podcast. But in terms of like things that I do with other games, table games that I'm not recording,
Yeah.
um, I try to keep my players talking in character as much as possible.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say I go so far as to punish them when they
Right.
speak in out of character, but I have
Is it just
character
kind of a rule, or like do you do something to reinforce that?
I have in character NPCs acknowledge what they said out of character as in character dialogue. Usually it's funny, haha, and it's not too big of a deal. But sometimes in tense scenes, it means blurting out something that you were trying to keep secret, and it changes the dynamic of a scene. For example, going back to Call of Cthulhu here, in games like that are very social games, the flow and control of information and clues very very important, and so you want to keep people in character as much as possible. In other games it's not that important, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but in Call of Cthulhu I would say like do little tricks like that to keep your players kind of on task and in character. Another thing is if they're debating amongst themselves about what their next course of action should be, and they seem to have lost the urgency that would be in the scene as real people. In other words, they're dropping kind of out of character. because there in real life there would be a sense of urgency if zombies are knocking down your door. So another thing that I do, for example, is just set a timer for like 2 minutes and put it on the table. Don't say anything. An hourglass. I've seen older DMs use an hourglass. That's a fun one, but you can just use your phone.
Yeah, same effect, same effect. And
Hmm.
I like it, especially, making a show that's meant to be listened to. I'm sure it's important to emphasize that everyone's talking in character because that's what you use for the show, right? And a show like Feddie Scum, again, we'll get more into it, but
Hmm.
you emphasize at the beginning that it's more on the side of audio drama, and
It
that's what
is
you were
more
going
curated.
for.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Welcome to Quickfire Chaos!
This week on Quickfire Chaos, AMAC and I are going to use some generators I found online that will generate mobile suits or mechs, and I'm gonna make Adam tell me how he would create them in his game with their specific abilities and that kind of thing. So this site is called shindanmaker.com. I have no idea what that means, but I know that it says mobile suit Gundam generator, and that's all I care about. So I'm gonna do your name first, and
Okay.
let's
All
see
right.
what it generates. It says primary color white, secondary color green, power plant, drive tau,
Oh, okay. That's
armaments, scattering mega particle cannons, and a heat. I don't know what that word is. Shotel, heat shotel,
heat
special
shuttle
armaments,
special armaments. Yeah.
rocket anchor, special systems, biocomputer system. Okay, is
Biocomputer
this
system.
anything? Is this like different than
Um.
what you've got in your game?
Well,
Could you do something with this?
the Trans Am capable drive is a double O thing, and
Uh huh.
that's a different AU. But
Uh huh.
it would be highly mobile.
Really fast.
So it
Yeah.
would have a really high mobility score. Armaments wise, for scattering, I do have a kind of a blast type weapon description similar to Zweihander with traits, so that you have traits attached to a weapon.
Uh
So,
huh.
for example, scattering megaparticle cannons could have that blast, so that when you generate a certain number of successes beyond what is required, that scores additional hits, and you can spread it out to multiple targets, things like
Ah.
that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
let's see what else we have here. Biocomputer systems. I haven't quite gotten to that yet. That's a thing that it
Yeah.
does appear in Zeta.
Uh huh.
It's going to improve new type abilities in some capacity. We're just started doing our Zeta season, and I'm not sure exactly how to do that other than like maybe a flat buff to your new type abilities and things like that,
Yeah.
or an increase of your new type rating overall. So in other words, out of the out of your mobile suit, you might have a lower new type rating, but in it, it might be higher, treated as a higher rating. I think of that as like a spell level, I guess, would
Okay.
be a nearest equivalent
Yeah.
for people who don't know Gundam stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I read biocomputer, it kind of made me think of Neon Genesis Evangelion.
It's not that insane, but
Right.
it's more of a compatibility thing.
Right. Could be very weird though. If anyone.
Less of your mom, more of yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do my name now.
All
Is
right.
it any different? Okay. This could be interesting. So mine is blue and gray.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, again, Tau
Again.
drive
Mm-hmm.
Trans Am capable drive Tau, which is interesting. Again, particle cannon, and then a beam trident, which is pretty cool. I'm sure you've got rules for those, right?
I do actually. One of my characters is using a well, he calls it a beam bident.
Oh, just
Because
two
it's only
prongs.
two, but a third one he kind of attaches it. I don't know why he went there. He was going for this pirate vibe, but he could just have a trident. But whatever. So back to the tags, considering that's like
Yeah.
the only major difference there. Um, it'll have like a beam tag, which kind of affects how easily it chews through armor that is not specifically designed to defend against beam weaponry. And then a trident being, it would be melee 3, which means you get to up to 3 successful hits of damage every degree of success you have over the initial, up to 3. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Psycho frame cockpit. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I missed that part. That is that's a bit later in the UC. I haven't gotten there yet, but it would be in a similar situation as the biocomputer, where it's going to improve your new type rating or increase the effects of it. I would say with Psycho Frame, it would increase the effects. Your overall rating probably wouldn't be treated as being higher. You're going to have the same abilities that you would have normally, but they're going to be treated as potentially vastly more powerful. Psycho Frame can be, well, I don't know if I want to go into it. Someone pushes back an asteroid from hitting Earth at some point in Gundam using that. Someone travels in time, for lack of a better explanation.
So it'd be pretty powerful. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of in-game stuff on that level.
All right. The last one I did is I just used the name Feddie Scum, and this is quite different than you and I's original.
Okay.
So let's check out this one. Okay. Gold is the primary color. Secondary color is white. Power plant is a Minovsky ultra compact fusion reactor.
Now that's normal. That's a normal reactor.
Armaments: double barrel beam Gatling gun and battle axe. Pretty cool. Shield. It's a new type destroyer system, the special system or feature.
Oh, okay. So starting off, the gold color scheme might just be a gold color scheme, but also there is color schemes in UC Gundam that help reflecting beam weaponry, and it happens to also be gold. So that could be a factor in there. That could factor into equipment. Like I said, the Minovsky Ultra Compact Fusion Reactor would be more of a normal reactor you would see in UC Gundam and OpV, and so it would have more of a normal value there. Double beam barrel, once again, it would be beam up to 2 free hits, and probably a lot more considering it's a Gatling gun, so you have a high rate of fire, so whenever you have a high rate of fire, that means you want to increase that limit on that tag so that if they score a high degree of successes, they get a high degree of hits. To represent the high rate of fire. Battle axe would probably be fairly normal melee weapon. Maybe the Gundam equivalent of cleave.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
And then shields I keep as disposable one-hit throwaway defense items, and so they are part of your equipment.
You can arm or you can have one when you go up, but it's only one use.
Pretty much, and so you have to get them replaced. It's a little bit of a joke on the fact that Armoro in the original Gundam was constantly throwing away his shields, and that they'd get hit once and slightly damage, and he'd just toss them aside and leave them wherever.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a one-hit, like, oh, I got hit by an enemy, I'm gonna have my shield take it instead of me taking the hit, and you toss it away. Now, the new type destroyer system, that is also an in-game kind of thing. It's from Gundam Unicorn, fairly late UC from where I'm at. It would be pretty interesting. It kind of hijacks other mobile suit Psycho Frame and Psychomu systems, and so if you're fighting other new types in mobile suits and they're controlling stuff psychically, you can hijack that from them and use it yourself. It'd be the simple explanation of it.
That's pretty cool. Kind of like hacking in and yeah, that's pretty cool. Would be pretty powerful. All right. I think that was pretty fun. I mean, hopefully it gave you a few things to think about, even if you don't have rules for them yet. And
some of that was far off, and it was the first time I ever thought about how I would implement it right here, right now. So that's
perfect. That's what it was meant to do. The only Gundam I've ever watched is Gundam Wing on Toonami when I was a kid in my buddy Scott's basement. Then we would build them out of Legos. So that's but it was a lot of fun. And yeah, cool. So yeah, we've talked about it already. We
Mhm.
mentioned it by name. Tell us about Feddie Scum. Where did the name come from? And also, yeah, how did the idea happen upon you, and how did you get the show started?
So the idea came initially from me being very bored at work, and I began listening to podcasts. I had a desk job at the time. I was not a barista. I'm a barista now, but I used to work a desk job as a web developer, a programmer, UI, UX, stuff like that. Kind of full stack, honestly.
Yeah,
Not paid
sounds
full
like it.
stack, sadly. Ugh.
Uh,
But so I had listened
did
to a
you
lot
build
of
the
podcasts.
website then? The Feddie Scum
The
website?
current Feddie Scum website, I mean, you could say build. I used a very nice little package to create it. I don't
Still
take
looks
the
good.
hard way unless I have to. With
Yeah.
most things, I had a lot of time sitting at my desk not doing much. A lot of wait time on other developers, a lot of wait time on management to give me the okay, a lot of wait time on end users to test. And so I had a lot of time to burn, and I spent that time listening to actual play podcasts, which I had just kind of discovered. In
Uh-huh.
particular, my favorite at the time was The Adventure Zone, their very first arc. I think it's called Balance. They named it afterwards, I think. I don't think they had a name when they were going through it. But I started listening to that and I enjoyed it immensely. Thought it was very good. And I sent it to Dallas for Dallas to listen to while he worked. Dallas got into it well and enjoyed it immensely as well. By that time, I had finished and I had started like looking around, and so had Dallas for other actual plays. And
Mhm.
Dallas kind of noticed that outside of some of the big names, that most of them were not very curated experiences. Most of them were very mic in a room, recording a game for 4 hours straight, bathroom breaks included. And Dallas kind of, when he realized that, called me and was like, "Hey, this seems like we could probably do it better." And so he asked me, like, would you be interested in doing it? And I agreed that, like, oh yeah, we probably could do it better. Dallas had already had a good wealth of experience as like an audio engineer and an editor,
Mm.
and I had a decent amount of experience DMing at that point. That I knew that I could probably wrangle together, a good size session for a chunk for an episode. It's very digestible, easy enough to edit, and mostly, fulfilling content, as opposed to, okay, well, now we're going shopping, and then everyone spends the half of the actual play episode shopping. So Dallas broached me with it, like that topic, and I agreed on a condition that I'll get to later. um, but now it is a podcast that has run for technically 4 seasons, even though we're only on our third season of the show proper. We have a whole bonus season that we don't really count. So we've played through the 1 Year War. We've played through 83, which is called Stardust. And we've just started Zeta. And we had an AU for G Gundam, which was a very hokey, over the top tournament arc, very much inspired by the show.
So, how did you settle on Gundam then specifically? And how did you decide I'm actually going to make my own system as well for this? Uh, I didn't. I should have done this beforehand. I didn't look to see if any other Gundam specific systems existed. I know there's a few mech systems out there. I know a few have come out recently, like Lancer, and there's a few others. But like, yeah, why Gundam and why a homebrew system from the ground up?
As to why Gundam is, at the
Yeah.
time when Dallas gave me this phone call, I was rewatching Universal Century Gundam, a comfort show of mine that I enjoy immensely, to a very normal degree, I say, pointing at a portrait of my favorite boy from it. Um, so it is a comfort show that is near and dear to my heart. I enjoyed it when I was very young, and it has kind of followed me ever since. And so I was in a
Hmm.
period of time where I was delving deeper into it once again, after kind of not really, bothering with it for a few years. And so it was on my mind. It was on my mind immensely. And so it was either going to be Gundam or it was going to be 40K. And I went Gundam. So it's Gundam.
Was it a coin flip or was it just this sounds more interesting?
It sounded more interesting.
I guess there's a 40K system, right?
Hmm.
So yeah,
Now,
yeah.
as to why I didn't use an existing system or hack it. I looked around at some hacks that were floating out there. I tried to find more viable ones. And I knew that for recording an actual play and keeping the record time down and almost equal to the edit time for the final product, I wanted something that was very narrative focused. And sadly, whenever you say the word mecha around someone who designs TTRPGs, generally speaking, you get Mechton Zeta, which is kind of a nightmare at times to go through. Very, very crunchy at times. Um, and so I didn't really find anything that I wanted to use. So I was forced to kind of make it myself. And it's been through several iterations. I would not call myself a professional game designer by any means.
Right.
I'm just doing what I felt was necessary to create the system that I needed.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned that the system is much more narrative focused because I feel like, given the very small snapshot of Gundam that I've watched plenty of other anime and in other shows out there about this kind of thing, and most of them are not very crunchy about like, well, I've got this thing and you've got that thing, and constant one-upsmanship and like arms race. They're
Hmm.
more about the stories, right? And so it feels like there would be a system, or I guess what I'm saying is it makes a lot of sense that you're doing it that way because
Hmm.
you know it's about the stories. It's not about like it is about fighting giant space robots, but like
It is,
not
but it isn't.
necessarily. Yeah, yeah.
You want it to matter enough, but you don't want it to steal the focus away from the characters, and that's kind of how
Mhm.
all the shows are directed, at least. You can
Yeah,
always delve into additional content to get into like the nitty gritty specifics of a mech, or well, mobile suits or Gundams in the setting, and it is some of them go quite in depth. Other series, like G Gundam, hey, I don't know how that cowboy football player rides on his flying surfboard and why the Statue of Liberty has a giant laser in it. It just does because it was fun to do, apparently.
yeah. Yeah. All right. So, you're designing this system as you run the actual play show. Um, how long before you started the show were you working on the game? What kind of framework did you have in place when you started recording? And then, what's the iteration process been like? How often are you making tweaks? How often are you introducing a bunch of new rules and that kind of thing to your players?
I try to keep the overhauls to each season. So
Okay.
at the end of season one, or well, actually near the middle of it, I did my first big overhaul. And then at the end of season one, and oh my god, well, that's my cat. Her name is Mina. Um, so at the end of season one, I did an overhaul, and at the end of season two, I did an overhaul. But initially, it started with Powered by the Apocalypse.
Okay.
But I found that that was a little bit limiting. While Powered by the Apocalypse works really good for people who haven't like role played a lot, the archetypes can be kind of limiting for people who know where they want to take their characters. If the
Mm,
system doesn't allow for you to change from archetype to archetype kind of easily in a dynamic, natural way. And not many of them do. Most of them kind of expect you to pick up the character and you play them to their end state, and then the game's over. And so I kind of moved away from that and moved toward this abomination that I have before me.
how many pages are you at right now?
Oh God, I'd have to look. It's surprisingly not that many because I keep removing stuff. Yeah, like 70. Half of that you can cut right fucking now. It'd be fine.
Hey, I
Because
mean, as long
I'm
as you know.
yeah. So a big issue that I'm having right now is and this kind of gets into kind of a later question, I feel. But
Uh-huh.
a big issue that I had was the game that I want it to be and the game that is best for running a podcast and for actual play are two separate systems.
Hmm.
Because what will work best for the actual play is not what will work best for the table, in my opinion. And so I was kind of at a bit of a dilemma here of which one I embrace. And ultimately, I've decided very recently with this most recent season not to kind of do a separate table version and then just say, well, on the podcast we use a streamlined version because we have to get the episode recorded and then, et cetera, et cetera. Because I realize that people don't want to play a Gundam TTRPG system, but the people interested in my system want to play what we're playing on Feddie Scum. They don't want to play something
Right.
else. They want to play what we're playing on Feddie Scum. And so I'm in the process of deciding what I want to keep for the depth that I added the last iteration.
Makes sense. In your mind, then, what are kind of the big differences between those two systems and ideas? Like what's the stuff that you would consider cutting versus what makes it more streamlined?
So combat used to be a little bit more in depth. I initially had a very streamlined combat where you just tell me what you want to do, and you basically roll. I tell you the dice prescription wise of what to roll, and then based on what you roll, you do it. I then kind of went into more of an action economy thing with a very specific drilled down action economy. And that felt a little too stifling, and so now I'm kind of in the middle of those two, where you do have limits on what you can do, but they're more generalized, kind of down to basically, you have a move, you have an action, you have a reaction, etc., etc. That in turn kind of simplified the mobile suit character sheets.
Have you had to think three-dimensionally because of space, or have you kind of just kept everything on the same plane? Like in Star Trek, when every ship meets another ship, they're always like, wow, we're both horizontal right now.
I looked at solutions to the three-dimensional problem that other games have attempted to make, and I didn't like any of them. There's no real good solution to it other than if you're not using a map, you can use range bands to kind of utilize that to your advantage.
Uh-huh.
Just imagine them
Uh-huh.
as spheres, and that's a thing that a lot of games use, and that's probably the initial approach I'll use. Though I do plan on having some hard numbers in this current iteration if you wanted to use a map, but for all intents and purposes, the map is two-dimensional
Definitely simplifies things.
because boy howdy, that it's a oh
It's a
that's a
lot to think about.
it is.
Yeah.
We don't want you
So
out here calculating delta V.
no, no, doing a bunch of trigonometry and geometry and stuff. Anyway, you mentioned also that one of the other shows that you are a part of is called RPG Stress Test,
Yes.
and your friends actually reached out to me a while ago and asked me if you could test some of the stuff that I was working on, and so you did a little bonus episode in the springtime running my Two Hot One Shot game, which was really fun to watch. It it wasn't streamed, right? Or was it streamed? I don't remember if it was streamed or not.
I know it was video recorded. I wasn't personally there for that one.
Yeah, you weren't. So yeah, you don't have to take any credit for it, right? but I watched it on YouTube.
It seemed fun from what I saw.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to watch them go crazy with it. But yeah, tell us about RPG Stress Test, the idea for that, and how that's been going so far.
So after our, we can call it a success with Feddie Scum
Yeah.
at this point, I feel. After our success with Feddie Scum, we wanted to do something that had a bit more variety to it, because Gundam has a bit of buy-in, and Feddie Scum, as a result, has a bit of buy-in that is required. If you're not interested in Gundam, or even a specific type of Gundam, if you're not interested in Universal Century Gundam, then you might not be interested in Feddie Scum, though we do have people who said they never watched Gundam before our show, which boggles my mind, but we're welcome to have you. Uh, but so we wanted to do something where we could change up the players, change up the games on a weekly basis. Initially, is how it was planned. Usually, things get multiple parts because guest GMs or whoever's GMing the system can't really do it in one tight session, and so we do it in
Yeah.
2 or 3. We break it out into multiple parts. It was mostly Dallas's baby and Dallas's idea, and he's the one who kind of picks out, the order of the episodes, what's going to make it into a season, stuff like that. I'm usually a player, very rarely a DM on that one.
So the idea behind the show is that you either reach out or people reach out to you and say, "Hey, can we test your system?" Or people ask you to test it, and
Mhm.
you just kind of put it through the ringer and see how it goes, right? which
Mhm.
is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we put it through what we call basically drunk friends playing it test, because that you hear the expression no plan survives the first encounter with the enemy a lot.
Yes, yeah.
Well, this goes for RPG games as well, and the enemy is your drunk friends who don't want to know the rules. And so that is your stress test. That is how we operate.
Yeah,
So don't
but I
show up
mean,
expecting too in-depth critique of minute mechanics. We're giving you the real stress test here, all right?
right, yeah, and given the nature of tabletops, probably half of tabletop games that are played out there are like this anyway, right? So,
Exactly, exactly.
you, it's the dose of reality that you need. Yeah. So, I guess you don't have to speak for Dallas, but if someone wanted their system to get played on RPG stress tests, who could they reach out to, and are you currently accepting new systems or new suggestions?
We're always open to accepting new systems, new suggestions, and you can contact the RPG stress test Twitter. That would probably be the best, quickest way to get a response.
Hmm.
DM should be open, or you can just at them on the main timeline if you wanted to. Sorry, X.com. Sorry, misspoke. Sorry, silly me. Silly me.
How dare you? I'm gonna tell Elon. Uh, yeah. All right. So back to Feddie Scum then.
Mhm.
Are you ever planning on releasing the system to the public? And if you have already, if people are interested, where could they go and find it? If you haven't already, what's the timeline looking like there?
I do plan on releasing it to the public. I always plan on releasing it for free because a lot of the things are going to be community led once I get it to a point where I'm like, okay, this is the core system. And I was going to open it up for, because I have a lot of people in the in my Discord and in my circles who are interested in just making stuff for it. In
Hmm.
terms of varieties of mobile suits, obscure weapons, etc., etc. Once it reaches that state, I plan on just letting it go, and so it would be eventually free in public for anyone to contribute or edit or hack, do whatever you please with. I don't exactly own the Gundam IP, so I can't
Right.
exactly do much with it. But in terms of timeline, I'm hoping before the end of Feddie Scum, which we have like probably another 2 or 3 years generously, just given on content. There is a kind of a I wouldn't say there's a hard end to the Universal Century, but there comes a point where the early Universal Century ends and late Universal Century begins, and it becomes difficult to play in that little middle period where there's not much.
Within the next couple years, we'll say is the soft deadline.
Yes.
Cool, cool. I like it. All right. With your game design, with your running the show, with all of the other different systems you run, what are some of the, if you had to boil down your advice or wisdom to folks out there running games, or trying to create their own games or creating content out there? I know that's kind of three distinct groups, but yeah, what's some advice you have for those folks, or some encouragement?
In terms of creating content, I would say be more impulsive. I always
Mm,
wanted to make content to some degree, but I always had a bit of a strange perfectionist streak that kind of made me incapable of finishing things. And so I would just say pull the trigger on it. Don't even half tease it or half set yourself up to fail or succeed, however you want to see it, by like, saying, "Oh, I'll get this done in this time publicly" or something like that. No, just release it. Just start working on it publicly. We started Feddie Scum pretty much knowing that, like, if me and Dallas never set a date for that first recording, we would probably keep kicking the can down the road for probably up to maybe another year or indefinitely. But we just effectively decided, hey, we're reasonably ready. Let's just go ahead and do it. Pretty decent motto. Obviously, you don't do that with everything. It's
right.
not necessarily great advice with everything.
Right, but for
Um,
content, I think it is.
yeah,
How
yeah.
about how about people who are out there designing games or thinking about designing games?
To amateur game designers, I can say, don't reinvent the wheel and just steal stuff. Just admit you stole it. Just say I took it from here. most game designers are fine as long as you're like, hey, I took it from this system. Props to that guy.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I don't know anybody who wouldn't be flattered if you were doing that kind of thing. So long as you're not trying to profit off it, right?
Yeah,
Off of
yeah,
their
yeah,
ideas.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people have like an open license and stuff, like powered by
Right.
the apocalypse. You just have to say the game's powered by the apocalypse. Blades in the Dark. Obviously, they have specific licenses for that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Smaller creators, you might want to reach out for them and be like, "Hey, can I use this system?" But for free stuff, it would be hard. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who will give you a hard time for referencing a thing and then saying, "Hey, I got this from this, and here it is," and not charging money for it.
And last but not least, GMs, DMs, people out there running games.
Hmm. Um. It kind of ties in with the first advice. I would say, don't be afraid to take risk when at your table in terms of where you want to take the story, flying at the seat of your pants, improving, or just even in planning. Take risk. We're at a table, we're rolling dice. It's about taking risk. It's about playing the odds, trying new things in storytelling. It's not a movie. You won't have to reshoot the scene. You won't have to bring the actors all back.
Yeah,
You can just have you can try a weird scene. You can just do that. And all your lose out of it is 5 minutes of time. Hey, if it's really bad, all the players and you can collectively agree it didn't happen.
cool. All right. Last but not least, where can people find you? Find the podcast you're on, the work that you do, and then anything you want to plug. Any you mentioned you've recently started a new season, but like any upcoming things on RPG Stress Test or upcoming things on Feddie Scum that people can look forward to.
So you can find me on Twitter primarily. If it's still around, I don't know. It might not be. But I'm at A_Mac_0079, and I go by AMAC on most other things. I think that's my Discord handle too. My DMs are open, I believe. Same thing with Tumblr. I think I'm on that. Have a YouTube. I mostly just shitpost. I wouldn't follow me unless you like just whatever my personal interests are at the moment. But in terms of upcoming projects, we're working on a Vampire the Masquerade project with
Mm.
5th edition, titled Blood and Sun, and we're recording the pilot for it like next week.
This is under the Dead Set umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Fun, fun.
Yep. And so that'll be a good one. It's going to be a one-on-one game, so it'll be just me and the player. And we're going
And
to
are you
edit
doing rotating players, or is it just one particular person,
just
or how's it
one
going?
player through an entire chronicle.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds interesting. Cool. Yeah. So I'll include links to all of the websites and the shows and stuff, so you can all go check that out if you would like. Hit up AMAC if you have questions about amateur game design or professional game design. He's ready for that. And if you want to geek out about Gundam or about Gunpla or whatever, he is your guy. So all right, thanks so much for joining me.
All right. Yeah. No. Thanks for having me.